there is one person that President Trump should pardon from federal charges forthwith. It would be incredibly controversial, but I think that it's absolutely necessary. That person is Derek Chauvin. President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. He should. He should pardon him his federal charges. If we are talking about reversing the evils of the last several years in American life, obviously COVID and its handling was a massive evil. Destroyed the economy, set us on a path to fiscal insanity, destroyed children, led to massive health-related cover-ups, just horrifying all the way around. And President Trump has taken on a lot of those things. But when it came to BLM, the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in my lifetime, was in fact the railroading of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd. The evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not, in fact, commit murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was high on. He had a significant pre-existing heart condition. George Floyd was saying he could not breathe before he was even out of the car. He was in the car saying he could not breathe. Derek Chauvin, for large segments of even the tape that was shown, had his knee on George Floyd's shoulder or back, not on his neck. The autopsy of George Floyd showed that he had no damage to his trachea, that probably George Floyd died of excited delirium. There were no accusations, even at trial, that Derek Chauvin had committed a hate crime against George Floyd or that he targeted George Floyd because of his race. Nonetheless, on the basis of extraordinarily scanty evidence, and despite the fact that there was massive pressure on the jury, that the mayor of Minneapolis paid a settlement to the George Floyd family immediately, that the president of the United States suggested that Derek Chauvin was guilty right off the bat, that the jurors were being openly threatened and admitted as much. Despite all of that, Derek Chauvin was convicted on federal charges and pled guilty to federal charges. Derek Chauvin should, in fact, be pardoned on that. We will be covering that a lot more in coming weeks because I think it is worthwhile to remember that there is a man who is rotting in prison because the media decided in the middle of 2020 that they were going to turn a tragic law enforcement stop that ended with the death of a man who had a significant problem with drugs and pre-existing health problems into the raison d'etre of the entire 2020 election. And it led to vast chaos. It led to, again, the destruction of racial comedy in the United States, $2 billion in property damage, and a guy rotting in prison who the evidence demonstrates certainly was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in that case. If we're going to talk about delivering pardons, President Trump, I think, should really seriously consider pardoning on federal charges. He can't pardon on state charges Derek Chauvin, who is convicted of the murder of George Floyd. As I say, we will be covering this pretty extensively in the coming weeks. Right now, you should go to pardonderek.com and sign our petition asking President Trump to grant justice to Officer Derek Chauvin. That is pardon, P-A-R-D-O-N, Derek.com, P-A-R-D-O-N-D-E-R-E-K.com. Well, folks, tonight, Daily Wire Backstage returns live for President Donald Trump's address to a joint session of Congress. We are covering it all like never before with Matt Walsh and me, live from D.C. Do not miss the exclusive pre-show at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by the full address, completely uninterrupted. And when he's done, we're back with a breakdown of what it all means. Watch with us tonight, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Daily Wire Plus. Meanwhile, speaking of legal matters, President Trump announced a little bit earlier this week that he wants to posthumously pardon baseball legend Pete Rose. He wrote in a Saturday Truth Social post, quote, Major League Baseball didn't have the courage or decency to put the late, great Pete Rose, also known as Charlie Hustle, into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now he's dead. Will never experience the thrill of being selected, even though he was a far better player than most of those who made it and can only be named posthumously. What a shame. And he said that he will be signing a complete pardon of Pete Rose, who shouldn't have been gambling on baseball, but only bet on his team winning. He never bet against himself or the other team. He had the most hits by far in baseball history and won more games than anyone in sports history, said Trump. Now, it's not really clear what he'd be pardoned for, Pete Rose, because he was never convicted of betting as a sort of criminal matter. He pled guilty to filing a faulty tax return in 1990 and did 5 months in prison. So it's not sure what exactly the pardon would be. Now, whether Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, I think, is sort of an open question at this point, given the fact that there are so many terrible people in the Hall of Fame. However, there was an ironclad rule in Major League Baseball that you should not bet on baseball. He did, in fact, bet on baseball. And so the ban seems largely justified to me, despite the fact that I'm actually kind of a Pete Rose fan. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi has now suggested that they're still going to release an Epstein list. I'm not aware that there is an Epstein list that hasn't been released at this point. I'm a little bit confused as to what exactly the goal is here. So Pam Bondi was on with Mark Levin over the weekend, and here she was suggesting that the sort of Epstein screw-up last week, in which the Justice Department released a binder filled with nothing, that actually is going to be solved in the near future. Here she was.
A source told me New York, SDNY, they're sitting on thousands of pages of documents regarding Epstein. Thousands. And of course, you've seen the very strong letter. We will get everything. We will have it in our possession. We will redact it, of course, to protect grand jury information and confidential witnesses, but the American people have a right to know. And Donald Trump is the most transparent president in our nation's history. So not only will America get the full Epstein files, they will get JFK, they will get Martin Luther King.
Okay, listen, I would love to see all of that. Also, I don't think there's going to be a lot there. And I think the screw-up last week, I know there's an attempt to sort of backfill that screw-up. We'll find out in very short order whether or not there is anything more happening here. Now, there are some accusations that the head of the FBI's New York field office was forced out of the bureau on Monday. That is according to NBC New York. Two of the sources who spoke with NBC News said Assistant Director in Charge James Dennehy was given a choice to either resign or be fired, and he was eligible for retirement and has officially retired. He said he was forced out, quote, "I've been told many times in my life, when you find yourself in a hole, sometimes it's best to quit digging. Screw that, I will never stop defending this joint." He said he was not given a reason for the decision. Immediately, rumors started circulating that the real reason that Dennehy was fired had to do with some sort of cover-up with regard to Epstein. I've seen no evidence to this point that suggests that that is, in fact, the case. It may be a sort of convenient way of finding somebody to blame for the screw-up that the DOJ ushered out last week. They, of course, said that there was a low-level person at SDNY who's basically covering up files, deleting files. But why would he be allowed to retire with his pay if that were the case? He should be legally prosecuted if, in fact, that was the case. So we'll have to see how that emerges, whether this is sort of a misdirect or whether it actually is real, whether somebody who's actually committing the crime of destroying relevant documents rather than publicizing all of that. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.